Hello, my name is Lisa Doolittle and I'm with the Faculty of Fine Arts at the University of Lethbridge. Welcome to Ed Talks. It's my very great pleasure to be talking today to Dr. Janay Nugent, who is this year's recipient of the Distinguished Teaching Award at the University of Lethbridge. So welcome, Janay. Nice to be here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so Distinguished Teaching Award. I mean, I feel like I should get down on my knees and, bow in front of you. And so Distinguished Teacher, how does that feel?
It's pretty exciting. It's a lot of fun. I guess, putting together the application package was pretty exciting and rewarding because I got to see what people said about me, because there's a lot of letters of support that have to go along with that, and just reflecting on my own teaching. And yeah, so it was a pretty rewarding process, and then to be selected is a great honor and a great privilege. So
yeah, and I think it also may show a little bit of the supportive community that we have here, that you get nominated for such things, and people really do recognize each other's work here. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been amazing, and just the emails. I spent 2 full days responding to emails and text messages and Facebook posts of people who had sent well wishes when it was announced. And yeah, the sense of community has been amazing, really.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So what we're going to do is we'll just back up and figure out how it was that you got to such a fabulous pinnacle. How did you start out being a teacher? You've got lots of other careers going. You're a history researcher, I'm sure.
Right.
And you have all kinds of other things going on. But we're focusing on the teaching part of your life.
Right.
And so what's a key moment for you about realizing you were a teacher?
I'm not sure if I had an aha moment necessarily. It was more... when you first start, you're so overwhelmed with all of the prep and all of that sort of work, so you're just sort of surviving, and you're teaching how you've been taught. And once you start to teach something a few times, then you begin to really start thinking, I want to shake this up a little bit, or I want to make it more relevant, or I want to have greater impact on the students. And so, just trying different things as I've been going along. And I guess maybe I had one aha moment, which was, as I'm thinking it through, with Sheila McManus, who is our outgoing Board of Governors teaching chair as well. She and I were hired at the same time in the history department, and we'd spent a lot of our early years talking about teaching. And one day we were doing that exact thing, and all of a sudden I had this idea about one of my course assignments, and it was the Reformation. And so teaching religious history is an interesting sort of a thing to do, because students come to it from a wide variety of perspectives. So for some students, the Reformation, which happens in the 1500s, is very much alive and real today. It's still really, really important, and it's part of their lives, and this is their religious perspective and outlook. And then you have the whole swath of people who then have never even stepped foot inside of a church, and have real assumptions and biases towards religious history, and in particular history of Christianity in the 16th and 17th centuries is what I teach. So I wanted to really get students to kind of leave that baggage behind. So whether or not they'd grown up in a particular environment where they had perceptions about other people's religions, or whether they'd grown up with no religious background and had biases or sort of perspectives about religion altogether, I wanted them to have to stop and really get into the shoes of someone who was living during that time period and understand how they think and what motivated them in their actions. And so I came up with what I was calling a mini sermon assignment. And so they had to, instead of a research paper, just a presentation, which would be sort of the standard things that you do in the class. I wanted to combine those a little bit. So they had to come up with a persona of somebody who had been deeply affected by the Reformation, then present that to the class in their persona, which in history, sort of dramatic or theater is not something that usually happens. You know, students are possibly in history because they don't want to get up and perform in front of a group of people. But I really wanted them to do that. So they had to research, you know, a question or a topic or something that would have really affected their lives. And then they had to write that out and present it to their audience. Now, it might be in the form of a letter. It might be, you know, in any other format. I'll give you a couple examples in a minute. But and then they have to hand in the fully researched paper to talk about where those things came from. And that was kind of an aha moment for me, because I was like, this is a great assignment. This is kind of fun, right?
All right, the fun factor.
The fun. I mean, fun, but also, again, impactful for the students, right? Because and it took me a while to kind of figure this out as this assignment was developing and unfolding, but that they really got a sense of historical empathy. Why did people do that? Let me understand the past. Let me feel for those people. Let me put myself in someone else's shoes. And so that was really important to me. And as the assignments went on, they were absolutely hilarious too. Like, they were so good. I've done this assignment a number of times now. I've had the Pope a number of times in class. I've had, you know, generals who are rallying their troops before a battle of religion, a war of religion. I've had an Anabaptist martyr on the stake before they've been burned, explaining to the audience their faith. And one of my favorites is, and quite creative, was somebody who was really interested in gender history. And so they can take this in a variety of different perspectives, right? Military history, political history, whatever, theological, if that's what they're interested in, but also social history. And so she was a priest's concubine who was trying to convince the priest to convert to Lutheranism because she was pregnant with his illegitimate child, and she wanted to legitimize the child. And so she did this whole research topic on sort of Lutheran philosophy and theology, but then also on sort of gender history and illegitimate pregnancies and all of these different research areas. And so it turned out to be a really great assignment, and the class really enjoyed it. The students really enjoyed it. I mean, when you first presented to them, they're like, what? And I'm sure I lost one or two students at the beginning who are like, I'm not taking that on. But most of them were quite into it. And as the assignment were presented, it turned out to be this great, fabulous thing. And slowly it began to actually shape my teaching philosophy centered around citizenship and sort of thinking about how historical empathy and understanding people's perspectives and being able to put yourself in other people's shoes can really be taught in the classroom and taught through history. And so that's something that has begun to shape all of my courses and all of my assignments as I develop them.
So the importance of empathy.
Yeah,
isn't that something? That's very interesting. Because how does one teach that? It just seems impossible.
Yeah, and I mean, I could sit there and tell them to be empathetic, but that wouldn't be useful. And in history, we always say, we're not here to judge the past, but it's so easy to judge, the past, why people did the things they did, especially when you're looking at atrocities or, a lot of bad things have happened in the past. People have done horrible things, which is what makes up a lot of history. It doesn't do us any good as a discipline or the study of history to sit there and judge them in the past. What we want to know is why those things happened, why people did those things, so that we can understand them and use that in an application for our own lives.
So bringing it forward.
So
making it relevant to the students.
Exactly.
Today.
And to really focus in on what the humanities are, which is to study what it is to be human, right? And so take that lesson and be able to apply it to our own lives. So.
Oh, interesting. It sounds very airy-fairy, which most humanities do. So, how do you defend these things? It does sound very airy-fairy.
Yes.
Be the Pope for 15 minutes.
Right. Well, and I mean...
And how does that make the student understand, what it's like to be human?
Well, and it combines all of the more traditional things as well, right? Research skills. It has to be fully referenced, as though they'd done a research paper. It has to be as thoroughly researched as that. It has to be well written, so it's the written communication skills. So they're grounded in all of the sort of traditional things as well. But perspective, understanding complex contributing factors to what people do is a really important transferable skill, especially in a liberal education university, right?
Absolutely.
And a lib ed degree.
Absolutely.
So it's an important, it creates those transferable skills. And I mean, one assignment doesn't do that. You need to do a whole lot of different things. But I think the assignment is something that's memorable and students really get into it. And if you can ignite some sort of a passion or an interest in it for the students, that those lessons are taken much more to heart and much more deeply. And I spend a lot of time explaining why I'm doing that as well, so that they understand I'm not just making you get up to perform for fun or for my entertainment or whatever, right? But these are my pedagogical reasons behind it, and I'm very clear about it. I talk about it all the time. And like I just had a student in my office this morning who was saying, she said, "Congratulations on the award. I'm so happy that you got it." And she said, I love your classes. They're totally different than any other class I'm going to take. But she said, but I learned so much. And so, I mean, I think the feedback I get from students on it is positive. They are getting that sort of pedagogical piece that I want them to get. And I do ask them all the time at the end of assignments, especially the first couple of times I try them, this was my goal. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Don't put your name on it. I just want to know whether or not it achieved that goal or not for you.
Right.
And if it doesn't, and sometimes things don't, then I toss it and I try something new.
Yeah. So how did you? This was in casual conversation, obviously, with another colleague who we both know, who's passionate about teaching.
Yes.
And you got ignited about teaching, but you had taught for a long time before that. Is this your first teaching experience at the U of L?
Right. Well, I started teaching in my master's degree at the University of Guelph, and I was a teaching assistant and ran seminars, and so I've been in the classroom quite a lot through the PhD program. They do a mentored teaching requirement, so you teach a course, but one of the instructors who normally teaches it sort of sits in and mentors you through the whole thing and gives you feedback all the way through. And and so I had quite a lot of classroom experience, but I wasn't, and two courses I guess I ran on my own before I came to Lethbridge. But I came to Lethbridge in 2003, which was fun because I had been an undergrad here, and I never expected to be back in Southern Alberta, but here I was, and it was great. It was great to be back here and teaching with some of the people who had influenced me. Right, so that was quite exciting, and so I started that in 2003.
Wow, wow, so quite a while.
Yeah.
And do you find what do you find with the students? Do you feel like you knew the students here well already, or were there surprises?
Thinking back to that long ago. I mean, I think because I am a lot of the demographic. I grew up in Coaldale. I'm a small town Alberta person, so I mean, I get that, definitely. I'm an Albertan, through and through. And so I get that personality, whereas a lot of other people come in and it's a culture adjustment, right? And I don't think I had that culture adjustment in the same way. I was also really happy to be back at a liberal education university because I'd gone away and done a lot of work at non-liberal education institution. And I mean, it was great in a lot of ways, but I really missed that being able to bring the different disciplinary perspectives into the classroom. And so when I came back, that was something that I was really happy to get reacquainted with because I'd kind of forgotten about it a little bit. And so that was great. And it's really influenced my own work, my own research, and the way I teach classes and that sort of a thing.
So in what way? Like, what's the big deal about the liberal education perspective? Because I don't think very many people actually understand
what that is.
What that is.
Right. Well, I mean, it's looking at problems from a variety of perspectives, I guess, is what the core of it for me is all about. It's also about engaged citizenship, which has really grown to become something that's really important to me. Take your degree, take your knowledge, take your ability to research, to critically think about topics, to be articulate and persuasive in your arguments. These are humanities, but also liberal education ideals, right? And to use those to improve your world, whether it's in your family, your community, or the world globally. Like whatever it is you're after, go for it, but use it and apply it. And so for me, that's what's really exciting about liberal education is I encourage students to, a lot of our students have minors or double majors. And regardless, they've taken their general liberal education requirements. They've taken classes in other disciplines, a variety of them, and I want them to bring that into the classroom. So it's great to have someone that's, has a political science perspective and a women and gender studies perspective and a music perspective. I've had students. I had somebody in the sermon assignment that was a music major who sang the Lutheran hymns and the Lutheran psalms. And so lots of different things. But bring that to the classroom because that informs the topic that we're talking about from so many different perspectives. And again, that's critical, right? That's about understanding the complexity of perspectives, the complexity of contributing factors that lead to problems or the reality that you live in. And that is about, for me, global citizenship, understanding the complexity of our world and bringing that to your life. So
certainly, plenty of religious wars going on now.
Yes, yeah.
Making those connections for students must be interesting.
Right, yeah. And that was just the first class. And I also teach a lot of social history and gender history. So I teach a course on the history of the witch hunts and also a class I just finished this semester on youth culture in early modern Europe, which is again about 1500 to 1800. And so whatever, whether it's a religious perspective, a gender perspective, or whatever the perspectives might be that inform our world, that I try to bring those different ideas into those classes.
Oh wow! Yeah, very nice. So the witch. What was the title of that course?
The Witch Hunts in Early Modern Europe.
The Witch Hunts in Early Modern Europe.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! And was this a topics course then, or
it's
part of a bigger?
Well, it started out as,
theme.
A lot of universities teach the Witch Hunts in Early Modern Europe. Sure. It's a popular class. It's also a great way to introduce gender analysis to your students. But it's also, it fills. There's always a waiting list for the class. So
full of people who wanted to be witches, or
well, yeah, occasionally. I always start with this is not a how-to class, but. Right. it's a really interesting class to teach. So at first I just introduced it as a one-off to see how it went over, and then I taught it women and gender studies for a while, and then I ended up bringing it back to history, which I've been teaching again the last few offerings of it as a history class, and it's a really interesting class because we look at this massive phenomenon where roughly 100,000 people were accused of witchcraft during about a 150-year period. Approximately, our statistics are not perfect because the records are not complete, but roughly half of those people died because of execution, of being found guilty of witchcraft. And so we really begin to just break that apart because from our modern perspective, it looks like, here's just a bunch of people who believed in magic and were irrational and they hated women and, all of these different things.
Right.
And so we break that down and we really begin to look at like the contributing legal system as states were centralizing and as you create this legal process, this legal court system and how that influenced it. We look at communities, we look at gender, we look at the political situation, the economic situation with a period of great inflation and famine and plague is running through and all of these destabilizing factors. And we just begin to look at all of those again. So the theme of the course is looking at complex contributing factors to a historical event.
Right.
It's too easy in our media to have, the 30-second sound bite and to think that that's the answer to all of the issues that present themselves. And so it's just that critical thinking and being able to say, I want to dig deep and to really understand, where we got to where we are today, because it's always extremely complicated, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the whole course is an exercise in practicing that.
Right. And so the youth culture one, is it true what I'm thinking that you're quite involved with the Center for Youth Studies?
Yeah, the Institute for Child and Youth Studies.
Yeah. And so I imagine there's a research teaching connection there.
There is, definitely. It's where my research has been going in the last couple, maybe 3 years, being involved with the Institute for Child and Youth Studies. And and again, it's that interdisciplinary liberal education sort of a perspective that's been informing that. Our core group of researchers includes a psychologist, an English person, somebody from education, anthropology, did I say psychology, neuroscience. I'm probably missing someone, sorry. But
a big cohort of specialists.
From a whole variety of areas, and we come together and we will talk about, I'm looking right now at identity or something like that, identity in youth and maybe nationalism. How would a neuroscientist look at that? How would an anthropologist look at that? How would a historian look at that? And it really begins to shape your own research. And so I wanted to take that into the classroom, especially with a group of mainly young people in the class.
Yes, indeed.
And to have them begin to really examine their own lives and how the world around them and all these contributing factors to their lives actually influence their actions, and who they can be in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because often we think of youth as being, fairly passive, being pushed and pulled, especially now, by consumer culture and not having much of a voice of their own.
Exactly, and that's, I want, my goal in that class, it was my first offering. I think I can get it better, but it was a good class, and I think that they did begin to sort of realize that young people are actors, right? They are in control to some extent, although they are also very much influenced. As much as we think of young people being pushed in every direction, not having a lot of power, they also, nobody individually wants to think they don't have any power. So,
well, exactly. Yeah.
So it is an interesting thing to kind of wrestle with. Where do those two things come together?
Yep.
Yeah. So it was
an
an
early modern
class.
Europe. So. How do people relate to that? How do you get students interested in that?
Right.
Early modern Europe. That's a long time ago.
It is. It is. So 1500 to 1800.
Way back.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that the students who like that
They
period,
don't have like music videos from then, right?
No. And it was really funny. So again, I did a role-playing exercise and all of that, where I had them have to come up with a young person who lived in early modern Europe, and they had to tell me like the region, sort of the historical like things that were going on in that region during that time period. They had to identify a more specific time period than that 300 years, and they had to identify if they're a man or a woman, if they lived in an urban center or rural center, if they were wealthy or if they were poor, if they were straight or not, and so they had to identify all these different things and really research what that would have meant, what we know about that, create this persona, and what motivated them, what was of interest to them, and that sort of a thing. And so they presented that at the beginning, and then the final exercise was a group exercise where they had to script a carnival event, because carnival was the major sort of cultural event of the year, and if it wasn't in a Catholic area, it was a carnivalesque event in a Protestant area. So anyhow, too much detail, but they had to come up with this as a group and then just script something that they would have done and why they would do it. And then they got into the symbolism that they used. They got into humor, which was great because they were telling jokes that if I told you the joke, you would just look at me like I was insane. But the entire class was laughing because they had really gotten into the culture of the time period and the context.
Oh, how amazing.
Yeah, so it was really rewarding. And again, it's that historical empathy, understanding, the influences, what they thought was funny, how they acted, because a lot of the youth events were often challenges to mainstream culture, right, to adult culture. And so how far could they go? How far couldn't they go? And how much were they actually just practicing to be adults who are going to conform to adult society?
Right.
And so that was, so that class, it was good. I mean, I think I still have ways to go in developing that because it was the first offering, but I think, it's something that, again, I've been trying so hard over the last 7 years to really make it more relevant to students, because you're right, 1,500 years ago, that's a long time ago. How much connection is there to that? How much can we take away from it? Lots of people are interested in it when you start learning about witch hunting and torture instruments, and there's all sorts of good things that people might be attracted to out of spectacle. That's fine if you're interested in that sort of a thing, but let's see what we can actually learn from it.
And about the people.
Yeah, about the people, and then from there develop those skills that a liberal education gives you, right? So research, teaching, or thinking critically, writing, speaking persuasively, that sort of a thing.
Oh, great. Yeah, it does sound like fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. doesn't sound like they need acting lessons either. It sounds like it just comes naturally once they're into it.
I mean, there are one or two students who are deterred by it every semester, but for the most part, they stick it out, and it is interesting. I don't actually often make them perform it. They can just read it if they want to. They can just script something and read it. But there was 3 groups in the end maybe 4 groups in the end for my youth culture class, and 3 of them totally wanted to perform it. They're in, right? And they're all in. They're like, yeah, let's do this. It'll be great. This is what this assignment's about. We want to get involved. Because creativity is also something else that's an important aspect of the liberal education, right? Being creative, thinking outside the box. And so if you're in a history class where it's always the same formula all the way through, you're not being creative, right? So I want them to think outside of that instead of a formulaic essay, although those are important too. Like I'm not saying they're not, because I also assign those as well, because they're very valuable, but I want them to do other things as well. So they were all in for the creativity aspect of it, and then there were 3 students who were not as keen, but they also didn't want to not be the only ones to perform. So they came up with this totally creative, out-of-the-box solution, which is they did a puppet show so they could hide.
Oh, how fabulous.
And then the other great thing is they did a whole research thing on early modern puppetry, which I didn't even know existed.
Oh, well, yeah.
And so they cited why they'd chosen that, and they went through this whole thing. So it was,
how fabulous.
Yeah, so again, researching, different things. So yes, airy-fairy, edutainment. I mean, you can see that some of those things are definitely, I can see why people would question those things.
The academic value.
Yes, definitely. But I never throw anything out there without thinking of it through, like a pedagogical reason or really wanting to make it relevant and really making it something that can develop people into being caring, compassionate, active citizens when they finish their degree. But also having those strong skills that'll make them have a good job.
Right.
Or
get them into the PhD program.
Or whatever it is that they want to do. But I mean, the skills are important. I'm not oblivious to that, because I think first and foremost that is important. People need to eat, right? So they need to have those skills that the degree gives them. But then I think it makes them even better employees to have all of the creativity, thinking outside the box, empathy.
That's so interesting to tie a subject like history to the innovation agenda. I think what you've just done is really interesting, because there's so much, the fashion to talk about innovation, and I think that being able to connect history to an innovation agenda is just terrific.
Right.
It's really great.
Thanks.
To think about the mode of teaching or the mode of doing assignment as innovation and as innovative teaching. Yeah. Even within a very, very, so-called traditional sounding subject. I mean, I don't think of history as being traditional at all.
But I mean, for a lot of people, history is dates and events and that sort of thing, which are absolutely, I think, important because it gives context. And that's the other really big thing history teaches people is context. If you've got to understand your context, if you're going to dive into something. So, I mean, those things are absolutely important and those need to be there, but they don't need to be the only thing. Yeah.
And you're quite involved in graduate teaching, I understand. Is this true? I hope I'm saying a true thing.
I mean, I'm involved with graduate teaching. I'm not sure if I'm really involved.
Somebody, a little birdie told me that some of your work with graduate students was very innovative. So I'm very curious about what that is, because, teaching graduate students it's not something many people experience, in the general audience that we're, broadcasting to. How do you teach a graduate student? I mean, they're doing research, they're writing papers, they're becoming a master of something. Yeah. What is it that you do as a teacher to make a graduate student make their formation a really good formation?
Right, and I guess one of my former grad students, Clint Lawrence, had written a letter for the teaching award, and he said if I had to describe what Janay had given to me, it was opportunity. And I think probably, and I'd never thought about it, and I wouldn't have been able to articulate it as well as he did, but I was really pleased when I read that and really happy, because I think that is something that I do that's a bit different, because as much as I've got the idealist rose-colored glasses about, liberal education and global citizenship, I also really believe in being practical as well, and giving practical on-the-ground experience. And so the reality is that many of our master students are not going to go on to be PhDs and professors and that sort of a thing. And so what I want them to get out of their degree is a wide variety of opportunities and skill sets. And so, I always try to make sure that they get an opportunity to lecture if they want to, but always giving them lots of constructive feedback about things like oral presentation, not about teaching necessarily. I mean, I do that too. But just to get those skills developed and fine-tuned even more, those transferable job skills, the research skills, but also in, getting them to do things like getting involved in organizations like maybe the Galt Museum or the Galt Archives, so that they've begin to develop their networking. One of my students, Ray Stoffer, right now, has been working, reaching out to our alumni and talking to them about their journeys as history majors. And because our majors go on to do a wide variety of things, whereas a law degree equals a lawyer, that's not the same with history. A history degree does not equal historian, right? It equals a wide variety of things. A study just came out that something like 40% of history majors end up in business, finance, and I can't remember the other one, but that's sort of a world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they really come to a wide variety of fields, and so I want our majors to understand that, and to be able to articulate. So asking, these our alumni what it is that their skills are that they got from the degree, and how they then use those skills to build in whatever direction that they've gone in. And so Ray is doing that. So she's networking, I could have done it, because these are a lot of my students are people that I graduated with, right? Right. I could have done those quite easily, but I wanted her to do that, to do the interviewing, to write that up, and to really network, but also to really understand and be able to articulate those skill sets and where you can go with those different types of skills. And so, I mean, those are the things, I guess, maybe your little birdie told you. I don't know.
No, I mean, no, it was just,
really sure.
I was because I'm trying to inform myself a little bit about you before speaking to you. And so I was interested in that. And, I have a couple of graduate students, and it seems like such an amorphous thing, teaching a graduate student. It's a different kind of process.
It is. So, wherever there's opportunity to do something beyond just grading papers.
Well, exactly.
That's what I want them to be doing. Get
something
out,
meaty.
Yeah, get into the community, get some networking in, start thinking broadly about different things, fine-tuning your skills even further. So, I think too often the Academy trains graduate students to be academics, but that's not the reality of the situation. Maren Wood is a graduate from our program and went on to do a PhD, and she started this whole research company about what you should be doing with PhD students to train them for the world beyond academia. And so I'm influenced by her as well. And so I think that's really important. I think it's our responsibility, as well as our undergrads, to really, get them thinking about, well, what are the skills that I've got from my degree, and how are these important, and how are they applicable to a job? And also to realize that probably they're not going to come out to a $100,000 a year job with a history degree, but they will work their way into that, because it's the foundation on which they build their future careers, and that's what the degree gives them. So I just spend a lot of time with my classes talking about that really explicitly, and having these open conversations and telling them stories, and and that sort of thing, so that they're a little more prepared when they hit the world outside of the university. So.
Yeah, that's interesting that you feel like the profession makes you have to do that, but I think it's probably true across the board for our students.
Oh, without a doubt. I think everybody, all disciplines need to sort of be involved with that, but I mean, everybody does it in their own way. So.
Yeah, and also the connecting to the community part, realizing that history is all around them, and becoming engaged in their own context, that's pretty important.
Yeah, definitely. I used to work at the Galt Museum.
Oh, you did?
Eons ago, between my master's and my PhD.
Well, there you go. I worked at Fort Calgary when I was
did you?
first starting out.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about Indigenous culture there that I use later on. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what was your
well, yeah,
work there?
I still volunteer for a committee at the Galt and still connected there, and so, you know, I encourage my students to go off and be volunteers and to, you know, try to, and not to be like a volunteer who shows up for one or two things, but to try to commit yourself through your degree, you know, if at all possible.
Nice, yeah.
And do some applied studies. I've supervised a number of applied studies through the Galt as well. It's just such a great place for them to go to learn about their community and to, you know, and to really hone skills in different ways than what we do. But also the volunteer and engage citizenship sort of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Get involved in your community, see what's going on out there. So.
And I mean, isn't the museum another teaching institution,
Oh,
really?
yeah. Oh,
It's
absolutely.
disseminating information
Yep.
and
Yep.
teaching a more
And
general public.
Exactly. Yeah,
different
the
kind of
general
thing.
public rather than a scholarly audience. So,
Yeah.
which is the reality for the vast majority of our students. So.
Yeah. Where to now? Here you are, this distinguished teacher. What are you working on? What are you? What's on the horizon for you?
I don't know, more of the same. Just keep teaching and continuing to try new things, I think, in the classroom. And to, I don't know, keep just going forward and trying to get engaged in community and that sort of a thing with the students as well. So I've also been this summer for the first time, I've been at a couple of teaching conferences giving papers. One was with Victoria Hollick from the Teaching Center.
Right.
Another one was on my own, although I was on a panel with Sheila McManus and Ann Diamond, who's in the art department, talking about teaching history. And it was quite funny because we're very enthusiastic and we all have these creative ideas, and we left that panel thinking that we came across as slightly crazy, but about all of our assignments that we consider innovative, but that might not always be the norm in a history class. But so I'm just going to keep on pushing those boundaries and moving forward, and maybe trying to engage more and more in the scholarship of teaching as well.
Okay, so that's a bigger teaching center kind of a thing.
It is, and it's not something, and it's new to me. And
so scholarship of teaching, let's break that down for somebody who doesn't know what that is.
Okay.
What is that?
That's a good question. I'm just learning. So you're asking me about the future.
You can help me figure that one out.
Right. Well, just thinking about pedagogy, I think. To me, this is what it means. I don't know. Probably other people have much better definitions, but just thinking about your teaching goals and your teaching methods and how to really consciously think about what you're trying to do with your assignments and the way that you teach. The scale-up classroom is another thing I'm really quite
classroom?
Yeah, that I'm quite passionate about, and that was the paper that I gave with Victoria Hollick. I was her second, and it was on the scale-up classroom, which is a flipped model classroom, which I don't do entirely flipped model, which means that the students do all the reading outside in the lectures. They watch lecture videos or whatever outside the class, and then they come into the class and they do the assignments hands-on with the instructor there, helping them through what would have traditionally been homework, so that you can engage in those conversations even more deeply. I do that a little bit. I just like the room, and I like, and
so the cat is out of the bag.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
I
just
like
a
the
really,
room.
really nice room to teach in. Forget all the fancy research.
Yeah, and no, but I think that engagement, so this is what the paper is on, it's an engagement thing. So instead of having just lecturing to students all the time, that you engage students and that you sit down at their table and you have the conversations with them. And so, I mean, even though I don't give them videos of my lectures, which would be horrible for all of us, I might do a little bit of lecturing, but I've cut that down a lot, so that now we do a lot more hands-on, student-centered sort of learning. What are your questions? How are we going to work through this? Let's solve these problems together. And so I'm hoping to be able to do more of that. If hopefully we will get more.
Making the student be more active, kind of in their own learning somehow.
Yeah,
Is that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's more, I guess, more future sort of stuff, which would be, I guess, scholarship of teaching sort of stuff as well. So just thinking about your teaching, thinking and being very mindful about what it is that you're doing in the different ways that you engage in material in a class. So rather than just kind of doing what you were always taught, how you were always taught.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know.
Trying
I'm
to
new to
advance
it.
it.
I'm
Yeah.
new to it, but to me, this is what it means at this point.
Right,
So-
and that seems to dovetail with your other work really nicely, because not every professor on campus would be at all interested in the scholarship of teaching. They'd be too busy doing their
own research.
Their research.
Yeah, and that's true. And so we'll see. You know, because I still have to keep my research program going. So we'll see how it all comes together. I'm not sure yet, but it is something that I've begun dabbling in this summer and hope to continue going.
Again, I mean, we're now a comprehensive university, and again, I don't know that people necessarily understand that connection between I heard you say own research as if it's kind of separate from your teaching.
No.
And it never is it?
No.
So in your case, what is your research program and how does it? We may have already talked a bit about that, but if we just focus on that issue, because I think university teaching is very, very particular in that way compared to public, like kindergarten to grade 12 teaching.
Yes.
It is distinct in that way, and you have a very particular research program, which is?
Well, it's on early modern Scotland, but I want to back up and say, so something that people often don't know about university professors is that only 40% of our job technically, usually, this is not always the case, but sort of the standard, is teaching. So 40% of our job is teaching, 40% is research, 20% is service. That's the standard. There are exceptions definitely to that. And service meaning being involved in university governance or on community committees within the university or even within the community,
or nationally,
or nationally or whatever.
Yeah.
So our job, doesn't end in April, and because we're carrying all of those different things through, but they all feed one another. And my service feeds my research feeds my teaching. It's just one big cycle where they all come together, and often I actually find it hard to pull them apart.
Absolutely.
And because my research, I would define myself as a historian who studies 16th and 17th century Scotland, with a particular interest in religious history.
So Outlander.
No, Outlander's later.
Oops. Oh well.
And I actually haven't seen Outlander yet, but I want to.
No, I just have a friend who's an addict, and I've only been able to catch it on the French channel, so I'm kind of like, anyways, go on.
I do have a colleague who,
earlier than Outlander. Okay, yes. we got you pegged
earlier
now.
Than that. Totally pegged. That's what it's all about. Earlier than Outlander. Yes, that's what I do.
So Scotland, 15th century.
Yeah, religious history, and also social history. So, what were the average people doing? And
cooking porridge.
Yeah, they were certainly doing that. and why do we care, right? And so that's the other really big thing. But I'm a historian from below, not a historian from above. Although the religious history is a history of above. I kind of like how the two come together and they feed one another. So that's what my research is on, and that's what I teach on, right? So there I have the Reformation, because this is one of the major events that shapes the lives of individuals in Scotland in the 16th century. In 1560, Parliament said, we're all going to convert from being Catholic to being Calvinists. And my question is, how on earth do you convert the religion of an entire nation? And I want to know on the ground how that's happening. And so that's where my teaching comes together. So I teach on the Reformation. I teach on youth culture, because that's an important aspect of it. If you're going to get a whole new generation of new religious beliefs, you need to start with the young, and so I'm very interested in that. So the youth culture comes from that. Witchcraft is very much sort of influenced by all of that as well, because it's about the instability of the time period, and religion and sort of religious fervor that's happening during this time is feeding very much. It's one of the major influencing factors of the witch hunts. And so I teach on all of the different things that my research is on, and then I try to take those lessons to apply them to something that is bigger and more important to students, as well as giving them all of those transferable skills that we want our students to have with the communication and research and all those different things.
Do students come across things that feed into your research? Like, do things happen in the classroom that
Oh,
feedback?
Yeah, all the time.
For instance?
Well, even the puppetry, right?
Oh, right.
Who knew? But no, it's interesting. Graduate students in particular, I just am blown away with what they can bring to me, and inform me about that world and about thinking about the world, the early modern world. So that's quite exciting. Portraiture is something that I never thought about artwork other than as, a historian saying, oh, well, we can see this trend reflected in this picture, right? And which I know art historians absolutely hate when historians do this, and or so I've been told. But now I had a student who did the portraiture of King Charles I and how he used his masculinity to try to define his identity, but actually he failed miserably and ended up with his head cut off, right? And so
because he didn't have enough greyhounds in the photo next to him to prove what a man he was, or what?
It's a 150-page thesis, but
okay, all right, we've got a couple minutes left.
But but it's just how he's not successful, or he's barking up the wrong tree and that sort of a thing. And so I would never have thought about how the presentations of art, like something that I'm not very well trained in, can actually influence all this. So again, it's that merging together of all these different perspectives and to try to understand big historical processes.
Yeah. Oh, how rich, isn't it?
Just. Yeah. It's very, very rich. And so, and students come all the time with things like references I've never read and details I've never heard of and perspectives that I've never thought of, which are also really interesting. So,
Do you have, because you teach religion, you touched on it earlier, you said people come with all sorts of different religious backgrounds.
Yeah.
Isn't it one of those sort of trigger subjects, or one of those subjects that's like race or even gender often, or sexuality, that's a trigger subject that that teachers would try actually to avoid, because it might be a really difficult thing in the classroom because people hold such different, strong feelings about it.
And have such personal perspectives.
Absolutely, it's very deep.
Yeah, last semester I had very emotional responses to various things that we were dealing with in the classroom. But to me, that's why you teach, right?
Really?
Yeah, you want people to investigate the world, their own perspectives. You want them to challenge those things, because that's how you get an educated society. That's how you get a society who questions where we are and how we've got there, and the responses that we have to issues that present themselves to us, whether it's dealing with your neighbor or if it's the refugee crisis, whatever it is, right? That you want people to really be able to deal with the hard stuff and to have different perspectives and to be able to talk with respect and openness, and that's as important if you're as left-leaning or as right-leaning as possible, right? Everybody deserves respect of their opinions, and to bring that into the classroom. And
how do you do that? I mean, literally,
it's challenging.
Do you have a moment of, oh crap?
Right. Oh yeah. Oh yes, without a doubt. And sometimes I don't even respond as well as I'd like to, right?
You have your own. Everybody has their own.
Yeah. I mean, although I'm, with experience, I get better at that as well. And but it's about being just really clear about this is a tough conversation to have, and don't feel like you've got to shy away from something. And I had a student in class this last semester in my youth culture class say, I don't know how to say this because I'm afraid that a feminist in the class is going to jump down my throat, right? And I said, just say it. We're not going to jump down your throat, but if we don't like what you're saying or why you're saying it, we'll explain to you why. Right? So nobody needs to be aggressive or angry, but just say it, because your perspective is valid. Whatever that perspective is, everybody's perspective.
It's there. Yeah.
Everybody's perspective in this class is valid, and I want you to think about your perspective and where it comes from, and how that both enriches and limits, your own life. So it does both, right? Everybody's perspective does that. So yeah. So I mean, it's about trying to be just as open as possible and as explicit as possible about why we're having the conversations and what I want to get out of that.
A couple of things that you've said make it safer
Right.
for that person to say that.
Yeah.
Like the way that you frame the classrooms, surely, because if the students do feel like somebody's going to jump down their throats, then they will never say it. So getting
Right.
to that point.
Yep. Yeah, exactly, because we have to have that conversation, as well as students who feel that they're marginalized and that they don't have a safe space. Like, they need to have that safe space to be able to have that conversation, right? So those are, you know, too much. I have so many examples in my head, but they're all confidential, so I can't.
Right? No. That's why I was saying, don't say the student's name or go deeper here.
No.
But I think that is obviously in your classroom. Some of this laughing and some of this playing, this
Right.
creativity, makes people relax and feel okay about being together.
Yeah, building community is so important about building community. I'm not as good in the first year class because it's big, right? I'm still working on that, and I'm getting better at that. But my third and fourth year classes, it's about getting to know the people in the class and building relationships and feeling comfortable. It's one of the things I love about that scale-up classroom, because they are in a group and they really gel and they really build community.
They're sitting around. Just to explain, they're actually sitting around a table. They see each other's faces.
Exactly.
They're not all facing in the same direction, like the room that we're in right now, which is more of a lecture studio. This classroom is much more like a pod, creates different pods for students.
And they get to know one another, and they explain things to each other, and they laugh, and they can, you know, in a group of 4, they can really begin to be vulnerable with one another. And if that group's not working, I watch and I shift them around, right? Because it's not always going to be perfect, but but I think really creating that safe environment is absolutely critical for, you know, students to feel that they can say what they need to say and to be heard.
Because that seems so crucial to have a student be brave enough to say, not only can I take on this other historical perspective, but I can say what I think as well, personally.
Yeah, and not just that I've been given my say, but rather I've been heard. Like, it's a big difference, and and so that's something that's really important, that what you have to say has not been glossed over, but it's been taken very seriously, and it's been considered, and nobody's passing judgment on whether you're right or wrong. They may or may not agree with you, but they have been informed by and understanding where you're coming from. So again, that historical empathy is the same thing as being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and being able to understand perspective, which, I mean, what a great skill for an employee to have, right?
Absolutely. And I've been thinking, you know, there's a book called The Past is a Foreign Country, which maybe you know about, that came out several years ago. And I keep thinking that ability to shift to another context, like you say, is just so important in the world today, because we do encounter people very different from ourselves.
Yes.
It's not we don't live in super discrete communities these days.
Yeah, no, homogenous communities, they don't really exist anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so...
if they ever did.
Yes, I know. It's very true. And I actually teach against that, so why did I just say that?
You actually teach that, right.
Why did I just say that?
You know, what you learn about the past, you know, you idealize it. You use it for many different purposes.
Yes, history is used well to promote people's perspectives. So
I'm just so, you know, again, to circle back, I'm thinking about that scale-up classroom. You know, it hasn't interested me personally, and perhaps other people that I've talked to, because the perception is that it's all about the technology that you can use in there.
Right. And it's not. I mean, it can be, and I definitely love the technology. Students love the technology. They're a technological generation. They grow up with technology, and so for me, being able to meet them with some technology, like, it's just speaking their language, right?
So what, you bring up an archive, or like, how do I
do that?
I've taught in the scale-up room.
I've taught in the room twice. Once the witchcraft course, and then once a women and gender studies class, which is representations of parenthood, and so it's more modern, so it's not as archival, sort of based, but so I mean, there's different ways that I can do that. I can get them to do, so if we're talking about research skills, I want you to go out and, you know, find one of my assignments might be, I want you to find a piece of material culture from the 1600s that have to do with
like
the
an
Reformation.
object or a building or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Something like an artifact or something like that. So I want you to find something like that that's to do with, say, the Reformation, and then I want you to come back to the class, and I want you to show me, or you can show everybody, because the technology allows you to do this. They can get onto their computer, they can control the screens, and everybody in the class can see it, or just their individual groups. Technology is amazing for that. And you can show them your research process.
Oh, the process.
The process.
Amazing.
So that's what I
Not
like.
just the
so
result.
how did I come about that? How do I navigate databases online? How do I evaluate those databases to make sure that they're ones that are reliable? That sort of a thing. So they show each other their process. So that's really, I mean, that technology, instead of let's talking about research process, let's actually do it with
through.
each other.
Yeah.
With each other, and
Interesting.
students teaching each other.
And
what their
students
process.
teaching each other. That's the point of the scale up.
And I'm telling you, I've learned all sorts of things that I didn't know myself, because they're out researching things that I wouldn't normally research for my own work, and then I'll be like, that's the coolest database ever. I'm so going there.
Yeah.
And I'll write it down. So it's something that they might do in that particular class, or in the witchcraft class, one of the things we talk about is state centralization. In the early modern period, you have the beginning of states beginning centralized. Part of that is creating a central judicial system that, the laws are applied
Rules.
across the country the same, the punishments are supposed to be the same, that sort of a thing, instead of every lord sort of doling out his own punishments or not. So part of the witch hunts are because they have this centralized judicial process. And part of that is judicial torture. And so when I talk about state centralization and judicial process, instead of me giving them, a lecture on all of these things, I give them each a piece of torture and a torture instrument, and I say, now I want you to go research. Would it have been the first degree, second degree, or third degree torture? How might have that been used? How would somebody feel when they were presented with it, because they're usually presented with the instrument first? Walk your way through how this would actually, why would the judges use this? At what point would it be brought in? And so I want you to go off, each of you, find out what they are, and then figure it out. And then come back, and each group will have 2 or 3 minutes to present that to the class, rather than me doing it. So that's so they're working together as a group collaboratively, and they have to think through the problem themselves rather than me telling them it. And so that's
much more participatory.
much more participatory.
Engaged.
They're using the technology. I'm flipping between screens all over the place, and it's easy. It's intuitive for me to do. It's just pressing of buttons and that sort of a thing. It's a great sort of tool for teaching. It's not the be-all and end-all. It's not the only thing. It's just a tool, right? That allows you to present things in a different way. So I think that's what I like. And then I also really love the pods that they're in, and they all have these giant whiteboards, 2 giant whiteboards beside the table. So I'm always giving them dry markers and telling them to write their ideas on the board, and the things they come up with are amazing. They just really get into it. Sometimes you've got dueling perspectives on each of the boards. Each group is each person with different perspectives is writing things down furiously, and it just gives more than me standing in the front of a classroom.
Absolutely.
Or a small group who doesn't have any tools that other than a piece of paper that everybody can't quite see because they're in a circle, right? So it's just a really great tool, a really good option.
So we could go on, is what we're saying. We could go on and on. It sounds like and I feel that the real enthusiasm for teaching is there, so I can tell the reasons why you came up with the award this year, and we're very lucky to have somebody who is, a top researcher and also so interested in passing that on to the next generation. So very, very lucky. So thanks so much, Janay, for speaking with me today, and I've picked up a few ideas from you as well that I will steal, which is what teaching is all about as well. And good luck with your tenure this year as the distinguished teacher, and we'll see you around the teaching center, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right.